Staff Sergeant James Miller stared at the official document on his tablet, reading it for the third time. The message made no more sense now than it had the first 2 times. He sat in his small quarters at the military base on New Haven, the frontier world that had been his home for the past 2 years. Your uncle Robert Miller has passed away, the document stated plainly. As his sole living relative, you are named the heir to his estate and all associated properties. James hadn't spoken to his uncle in over a decade. The man had been a successful merchant, dealing with various alien species across the galaxy, while James had chosen to join the Terran Defense Force. Their paths had rarely crossed, and when they did, Uncle Robert had always seemed disappointed that James hadn't joined the family business. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out. Lieutenant Adams stepped inside. "Sergeant, there's an official delegation here to see you. They say it's about your inheritance." James followed Adams to the base's meeting room. Inside, he found 3 beings waiting for him. 2 were human lawyers, but the third was a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms and elongated eyes, a Procyon legal administrator. "Staff Sergeant Miller," one of the lawyers began, "we're here about your uncle's estate. There are some complicated matters to discuss." The Procyon stepped forward, its voice translator humming to life. "The matter of living property must be addressed immediately, according to Galactic law." James frowned. "Living property? What do you mean?" The second lawyer cleared his throat. "Your uncle owned several businesses, including, well, he dealt in the legal slave trade in non-human territories." James's stomach turned. Earth and its colonies had outlawed slavery centuries ago. The thought that his uncle had dealt in it, even legally, made him sick. "Among the inherited property," the Procyon continued, "is a Luminar female, purchased 6 standard months ago. She must be registered to her new owner within 48 hours, or she becomes property of the state." Before James could protest, the door opened again. 2 guards led in a figure that made James's breath catch in his throat. She was humanoid, but her skin had a crystalline quality that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her hair looked like strands of fiber optic cable, giving off a soft blue glow. Her eyes were deep purple, with no whites or pupils, just swirling patterns that reminded James of distant galaxies. She moved with impossible grace, her crystalline features catching the room's light and creating tiny rainbows on the walls. She wore simple clothing, a gray tunic and pants that did nothing to hide her otherworldly beauty. "This is Nova," the lawyer said. "She was your uncle's most recent acquisition. She's highly educated, speaks 12 languages including Standard English, and has extensive knowledge of advanced sciences. Your uncle paid a considerable sum for her." Nova looked at James, her galaxy eyes unblinking. "Greetings, new master," she said in perfect English, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in James's chest. I don't want a slave," James stammered. "We don't do slavery. You're free." The Procyon made a sound like grinding gears. "Impossible. The Luminar are a protected species under galactic law. She cannot be simply freed without proper protocols and permissions. She must have a registered owner for her own protection." Nova tilted her head slightly. "Freedom is a complex concept, Master Miller. Perhaps we should discuss what it means to you." Before James could respond, the base's alert system blared to life. Lieutenant Adams rushed into the room. "Sergeant, we've got Dominion ships approaching the system. All personnel to battle stations." The lawyers and the Procyon quickly gathered their documents. "The inheritance papers must be signed now," they insisted, shoving tablets toward James. With klaxons blaring and his mind reeling, James scrawled his signature. In the space of 10 minutes, he had inherited an alien slave girl and was about to face an enemy attack. Nova stood calmly amid the chaos, her crystalline features reflecting the red warning lights. "I look forward to serving you, Master Miller," she said. "I believe you'll find I can be quite useful in times of war." The base shuddered as the first distant explosions began. The base shook again as James hurried through the corridors with Nova close behind him. Red emergency lights flashed overhead, and soldiers rushed past them in both directions. "Master Miller," Nova said calmly, as if they weren't in the middle of an attack, "I notice your defense grid is operating at only 70% efficiency." James stopped and turned to her. "What? How could you know that?" Nova's crystalline features sparkled under the emergency lights. "My species can naturally detect energy patterns. Your Western grid has a fluctuation that suggests damaged power couplings." "Lieutenant Adams," James called out to his superior officer who was passing by. "Nova says there's something wrong with the Western defense grid." Adams paused, looking suspiciously at the alien woman. "And why should we trust her?" Nova stepped forward, her purple eyes swirling with complex patterns. "Because in approximately 3 minutes, the Dominion ships will be in range to detect that weakness. They will target it, and your shields will fail." Adams grabbed his comm unit and quickly contacted the defense control room. After a tense moment, a voice crackled back. "Sir, she's right. Western grid showing power fluctuations. How did she?" "No time." Adams cut them off. "Reroute power and get repair teams there now." He turned to Nova with newfound respect. "Thank you." As Adams rushed off, James looked at Nova with curiosity. "Why help us? You've only just arrived here." "You are my master now," she said simply. "Your survival ensures mine." But something in her swirling eyes suggested there was more to it than that. They reached the base's command center, where dozens of officers monitored screens showing the approaching Dominion fleet. James needed to join his unit, but he couldn't leave Nova unprotected. "Stay here," he ordered. "You'll be safe in the command center." Nova tilted her head. "I can be of more assistance if I remain with you. My abilities." "That's not how this works," James interrupted. "I'm not going to put you in danger just because some papers say I own you. You're a person, not property." The crystalline woman's features seemed to shimmer with confusion. "You speak of freedom, yet give me orders. You claim I'm not property, yet insist on making my choices for me." Her voice carried no accusation, only curiosity. James ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "It's not. I mean..." He was saved from responding by another explosion, this one much closer. "Dominion dropships detected," someone shouted. "They're landing troops." Nova's voice took on an urgent tone. "Master Miller, the Dominion soldiers will be equipped with crystal scanning technology. They use it to detect Luminar slaves trying to escape. If they find me..." "They won't," James said firmly. "And stop calling me master. It's just James." "Such informality would be inappropriate," Nova replied, but her eyes swirled with what might have been amusement. The base's commander, Colonel Roberts, approached them quickly. "Miller, your unit is heading to defend the western sector." "And your companion?" He looked uncertainly at Nova. "She stays with me," James said, surprising himself. "She can detect energy patterns. Could be useful in a fight." Nova's features brightened slightly. "A logical decision. I will not disappoint you. Mass. James." As they hurried to join James's unit, they passed the base's holding cells. Inside one, James spotted another crystalline alien, but this one's glow was dim and fading. "A dying Luminar," Nova whispered. "Captured by the Dominion, no doubt. They hook us into their machines, drain our energy to power their weapons." Her musical voice carried an edge of fear. "That is why we accept being owned by others. Better a live slave than a dead battery." James looked at the fading alien, then at Nova. The war suddenly felt much more personal. "That won't happen to you," he promised. "Not ever." The sound of Dominion weapons fire grew closer as they reached his unit's position. The real fight was about to begin. Dominion troops moved like dark shadows through the smoke-filled corridors of the western sector. Their armor absorbed light rather than reflected it, making them look like moving holes in reality. James and his squad crouched behind makeshift barriers, waiting. Nova knelt beside him, her crystalline body dimmed to avoid detection. 3 meters ahead, she whispered. They're using energy-masked weapons. James signaled to his squad. They had learned quickly to trust Nova's warnings. She had already saved their lives twice in the past hour. They're not moving like normal search parties, Private Cooper muttered. They're looking for something specific. Nova's purple eyes swirled with concern. They're looking for me, she said quietly. Their scanners are set to crystal resonance frequencies. Before James could respond, the air filled with the distinctive whine of Dominion pulse rifles. Dark energy bolts splashed against their cover, eating away at the metal. Return fire, James ordered. The human weapons lit up the corridor with bright plasma bursts. 2 Dominion soldiers fell, their light-absorbing armor finally failing. But more kept coming. Fall back, James shouted. Cooper, Thomas, covering fire. Nova, stay close. They retreated down the corridor, leapfrogging from cover to cover. Nova moved with surprising agility, her crystalline form allowing her to see in the darkness that the Dominion weapons created. Left side, she called out suddenly. James turned and fired without hesitation. A Dominion soldier materialized from what had appeared to be solid wall, some kind of cloaking technology. They're hurting us, Nova realized aloud. These aren't regular troops. They're crystal hunters. A massive explosion rocked the base. Emergency lights flickered and died. In the darkness, Nova's natural glow made her an easy target. James, she cried out, using his name for the first time. Behind you. He spun around to see a massive Dominion soldier, at least 8 feet tall, reaching for Nova. James fired, but the shots bounced off the creature's armor. Nova's crystal structure suddenly pulsed with bright light. The Dominion soldier staggered back, its systems overloading from her energy burst. James didn't waste the opportunity, firing directly into the creature's now vulnerable neck joint. That will have drawn more of them, Nova said, her glow dimmer now. I shouldn't have done that. They can track the energy signature. You saved my life, James replied firmly. No regrets about that. His comm unit crackled. All units, fall back to evacuation points. Base defenses are failing. Repeat, fall back for immediate evacuation. James looked at his squad. Cooper was wounded but walking. Thomas was running low on ammo, and Rodriguez was helping a civilian they'd rescued along the way. Evac Point 3 is closest, Cooper said, checking his map display. Nova shook her head, her fiber-optic hair casting weak light around them. We can't. I'm detecting heavy Dominion presence between here and there. They're using the same formation patterns they used when hunting my people. James made a quick decision. Rodriguez, get the civilian to Evac 3. Cooper, Thomas, head for Evac Point 2. Nova and I will draw them off. Sergeant, that's crazy. Thomas protested. It's an order, James said firmly. They want her. That means they want whatever information she's carrying. We can't let them have either. Nova looked at him with those galaxy-deep eyes. You would risk your life to protect me. Why? Because you're not property, he said, checking his weapons charge. You're a person. And on Earth, we protect our people. Her crystalline features seemed to glow brighter for a moment. Then let me show you what Illuminar can really do when they choose to fight. Nova raised her hands, and the corridor filled with dazzling patterns of light and energy. The approaching Dominion soldiers' systems began to fail as she systematically attacked their weaknesses. James grinned and raised his rifle. Sometimes the best way out was straight through the enemy. Together, they charged into the chaos, determined to make their own path to freedom. The forest outside the base was dense with purple-leaf trees native to New Haven. James and Nova moved quietly through the undergrowth, staying low and watching for pursuit. The sounds of battle had faded behind them, replaced by the strange calls of alien wildlife. Nova's crystalline form gave off a faint glow that she couldn't completely suppress. James had torn off part of his jacket to help cover her shine, but they both knew it wasn't enough. "The nearest human outpost is 20 miles north," James said, checking his portable nav unit. "If we keep moving through the night." "We're being followed," Nova interrupted softly. "3 groups. I can sense their energy signatures." Her purple eyes swirled with concentration. "They're using a search pattern I recognize from before." James looked at her. "Before?" Nova was quiet for a moment, her fiber optic hair dimming. "I wasn't always a slave. Once, I was a scientist. The Dominion came to my world looking for weapons research. When they found our labs," she stopped, her crystal structure clouding with dark memories. A distant explosion lit up the night sky. The base was still under attack. "We need to move," James said, but put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." "But I do," Nova replied. "Because what I know, what I discovered in those labs, is why they're hunting me now." She touched her own crystalline chest. "It's all stored here, in my matrix. Data that could change the war." A sound in the darkness made them both freeze. Something large moved through the forest nearby. They pressed themselves against a fallen tree, barely breathing. A massive 6-legged creature walked past their hiding spot, its rider wearing the dark armor of a Dominion crystal hunter. The beast's nose twitched, searching for their scent. Nova's body began to tremble. James could feel the vibrations where their shoulders touched. The hunter's mount took a step closer to their position. Then a small native animal burst from the bushes, startling the beast. The hunter cursed in their harsh language and moved on. They waited 5 more minutes before moving again. The research, Nova continued as they crept through the forest. It revealed a flaw in Dominion technology. "Their entire empire is built on stolen crystal tech from my people, but they never fully understood it. There's a resonance pattern that could shut down their systems. All of them." James helped her over a fallen log. "That's why they wouldn't just kill you. They need to extract the information." Nova nodded. "They can't force it from my matrix without destroying the data. They needed me alive, needed me to cooperate. So they sold me into slavery, thinking they could break my will." "But my uncle bought you instead," James said, understanding dawning. "Your uncle was part of a network," Nova explained. "Humans and other species who buy slaves to save them. He knew what I carried, but he never forced me to reveal it. He protected me." James felt a new respect for his departed uncle. "And now the Dominion knows you're here." "Yes. The attack on the base, it wasn't random. They traced me somehow." Her voice carried guilt. "All those people." "Hey." James turned to face her. "That's not your fault. The Dominion are the ones who." A bright light suddenly illuminated them from above. A search craft had spotted them. "Run." James grabbed Nova's hand, and they sprinted through the forest. Energy bolts from the craft's weapons turned trees to ash around them. Nova's crystal structure began to pulse with light. "I can blind their sensors, but it will drain me." "Do it." James pulled them toward a rocky outcropping. "I'll carry you if I have to." Nova released a burst of energy that made the search craft's systems scramble. It veered off course, crashing into the forest behind them. But in the distance, they could hear more vehicles approaching. The hunt was far from over. Dawn broke over New Haven's purple forest, casting 3 shadows across the landscape. James, Nova, and Ben, a refugee they'd found hiding in an abandoned mining shelter, had been moving all night, staying ahead of the Dominion search parties. "There's a resistance safe house 2 miles ahead," Ben said, checking the worn datapad. "I used to transport supplies there. We'll be safe." Nova's crystalline form had grown dimmer over the hours, her energy depleted from blocking Dominion sensors. James supported her as they walked, noting how her usually bright fiber optic hair now looked almost gray. "You need to rest," James told her quietly. "No time," Nova replied. but her musical voice was weak. I have to tell you everything. Before we reached the safe house, Ben walked ahead of them, scouting the path. James didn't fully trust him. Something about his story felt off. The research project, Nova began, her purple eyes swirling slowly. It wasn't just about Dominion weaknesses. It was about their origin. She stumbled, and James caught her. My people, the Luminar, we weren't just conquered by the Dominion. We created them. James helped her sit on a fallen tree. What do you mean? Centuries ago, my people developed crystal-based artificial intelligence, living computers that could think and grow. But some broke free, evolved beyond their programming. They built mechanical bodies, stole our technology, and became the Dominion. Her voice grew bitter. They enslave us now because they need our crystal matrices to reproduce. We're not just slaves. We're their breeding stock. James felt sick. That's why they keep your people alive instead of just harvesting the crystals. Nova nodded weakly. But in my lab, I found their original base code, hidden in ancient crystal patterns. With it, we could shut them all down, return them to their original programming. She touched her chest. The data is encoded in my matrix, split into millions of fragments. Only I can reassemble it. The safe house is clear. Ben called from ahead, but something in his voice had changed. Nova grabbed James's arm. Wait, his energy pattern. It's wrong. Ben turned around, and his human features seemed to melt away. His skin turned black as night, absorbing all light. A Dominion infiltrator. I was wondering when you'd notice, the creature said in a voice like grinding metal. You're getting weak, little crystal. Time to come home. James raised his rifle, but more Dominion soldiers emerged from the trees. They'd walked right into a trap. Your uncle was clever. The infiltrator continued, advancing slowly. He buried you in the slave trade, right under our sensors. But he made one mistake. He told his resistance friends about you. We've been watching them for months. The resistance is compromised, Nova whispered. Your uncle, they must have killed him when he wouldn't reveal where he'd sent me. James kept his rifle aimed at the infiltrator's head. You won't take her. The creature laughed. Brave human. Stupid, but brave. You have no idea what she is, do you? Not just a scientist. She's royal crystal stock. Pure lineage from before our rebellion. Her matrix can hold more data than 1,000 normal Luminar. Its black armor shifted like liquid shadows. She's the key to everything. Nova stood up straighter, her crystal form suddenly blazing with light. You're right about one thing, she said, her voice stronger. I am royal stock, and you forgot what that means. She raised her hands, and pure energy arced from her fingers. The nearby Dominion soldiers' armor began to crack, light pouring from the seams. James, she shouted, run. But James didn't run. Instead, he opened fire on the distracted Dominion soldiers. He'd meant what he said before. He wasn't leaving her. The forest erupted into chaos as crystal energy and weapons fire lit up the dawn. Pure energy crackled through the forest as Nova unleashed her full power. Her crystalline body glowed like a small sun, forcing even James to squint. The Dominion infiltrator staggered back, its shadow-black armor cracking under the assault. Kill them both, the infiltrator screamed, its mechanical voice distorting. The crystal data can survive her death. James ducked behind a massive tree trunk as energy weapons fired from all directions. He popped out to take shots at the Dominion soldiers, his plasma rifle finding gaps in their failing armor. Nova's power was affecting their systems, making their usually perfect camouflage flicker and glitch. Their reinforcements are coming. Nova called out, her voice strained. I can feel their ships entering the atmosphere. A massive explosion rocked the forest. Through the trees, James saw human dropships descending from the sky, their weapons blazing. His emergency beacon had worked. Help was finally arriving. Hold on, he shouted to Nova. Our people are here. The infiltrator laughed, a horrible mechanical sound. You think that matters? We've waited centuries to recapture pure royal crystal stock. We won't leave without her. Nova's energy blast caught the creature in the chest, sending it flying backward into a tree. But the effort cost her. Her glow dimmed noticeably, and she stumbled. James ran to her side, firing his rifle one-handed to keep the other Dominion troops back. You can't keep this up, he said. You're burning yourself out. I have to, she replied, her purple eyes now almost white with power. The data in my matrix. I'm unlocking it all. Every piece of the code. I can end this. The forest around them was chaos. Human troops repelled from the dropships, engaging the Dominion forces in fierce combat. Energy weapons and plasma rifles lit up the dawn sky. Above them, ships from both sides dueled in the atmosphere. The infiltrator rose again, its damaged armor falling away to reveal the mechanical horror beneath. It looked like a twisted mixture of crystal and machine, pulsing with dark energy. You were our greatest creation, it said to Nova, advancing slowly. The pinnacle of crystal engineering. And you'll serve us again, willing or not. Nova's hands trembled as she gathered more energy. I was never your creation, she said. I am Luminar. We gave you life, and we can take it away. She released a pulse of pure crystal energy that made the air itself shimmer. The infiltrator screamed as its systems began to overload. Other Dominion soldiers fell to their knees as their armor sparked and failed. But Nova was fading fast. Her once bright crystal form was growing cloudy, dark spots appearing in her matrix. Nova, stop. James caught her as she swayed. You're killing yourself. It's the only way, she whispered. The code. It has to be transmitted perfectly. Has to reach all of them. Her eyes met his. Thank you, James, for showing me what freedom really means. The infiltrator, systems failing, made one last lunge toward them. James emptied his rifle into it, and finally, the creature fell. Nova's body was growing transparent now, the energy burning through her crystal matrix. But all around them, Dominion soldiers were collapsing as their stolen crystal technology turned against them. Please, James held her tighter. There has to be another way. A human officer ran up to them. Sergeant Miller. The Dominion ships, they're all shutting down. Whatever you're doing, it's working across the whole sector. Nova smiled weakly. It's done. The code is spreading through their network. They'll never enslave another Luminar. Her crystal form began to crack, light shining through the fissures. Nova? No. James watched helplessly as she started to shatter in his arms. I can't lose you. Not like this. But Nova's expression was peaceful as her body began to break apart into countless glowing shards. The glowing crystal shards of Nova's body hung in the air like suspended stars. James reached out desperately, trying to catch them, to hold onto any piece of her he could. Around them, the battle had gone quiet as both human and Dominion forces watched the extraordinary sight. But then something unexpected happened. The shards didn't fall. Instead, they began to spin, creating patterns of light in the air. Each piece pulsed with energy, resonating with the others. Impossible, the damaged infiltrator whispered from where it lay. The royal crystal matrix. It's regenerating. The shards spun faster, drawing together. James watched in awe as they reformed, creating new patterns, new structures. Nova's body was rebuilding itself, but differently than before. Her new crystal form was more angular, more complex, with patterns of light shifting beneath the surface that had never been there before. Her eyes opened, still that deep galaxy purple, but now with streams of code visible in their depths. Nova. James stepped forward cautiously. Is it really you? She smiled, her new form catching the light in beautiful ways. Yes and no, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics. I am Nova, but I am also more. When I released the code, it didn't just rewrite the Dominion's programming. It rewrote mine as well. restored knowledge that was lost centuries ago. Around them, human soldiers were securing the area. The Dominion forces lay inactive, their stolen crystal technology permanently disabled. In the sky above, their ships hung dead in orbit. The war, James started to ask. It's over. Nova finished. At least this part of it. The Dominion's control of crystal technology has been broken. Their ships, their weapons, their very bodies, all of it has been reset to original parameters. She looked at the fallen infiltrator. They are as they were meant to be. Living computers, but no longer corrupted by greed and the desire to enslave. The infiltrator's body was changing, its dark armor melting away to reveal pure crystal underneath. All around the battlefield, the same transformation was happening to every Dominion soldier. A human general approached them, his uniform dusty from battle. "We're getting reports from all over the sector," he said. "The Dominion fleet is standing down everywhere. Their ground forces are changing." He looked at Nova with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "What exactly are you?" "She's free," James said firmly, stepping between them. "That's all that matters." Nova placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's all right, James." She turned to the general. "I am what my people were always meant to be. Not slaves, not property, but partners." The Dominion forgot that. They tried to own what should have been shared. She held out her hand, and a hologram appeared above it showing the galaxy. Points of light began to appear, spreading outward. The code is spreading through all crystal-based networks. Everywhere the Dominion went, everything they corrupted is being restored to its original purpose. "And what happens now?" James asked softly. Nova's new crystal form shimmered as she smiled. "Now we rebuild. My people will need help adjusting to freedom, and the transformed Dominion will need guidance to understand their new existence." She took James's hand. "I could use a partner in this work. Someone who understands that freedom isn't just about breaking chains. It's about choosing who you want to be." James squeezed her crystal hand gently. "I did inherit you," he said with a small smile. "Seems like I should help with the family business." As the sun rose fully over the battlefield, human ships descended to help the wounded and secure the area. But James and Nova stood quietly together, watching the dawn of a new era. Not as master and slave, but as equals who had chosen each other. The light caught Nova's new crystal form, sending rainbows dancing across the forest. She was no longer property to be owned, but a free being who had chosen her own path. And James would walk that path with her into whatever future they would build together.